Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're talking Scarabs and we're talking ghost busting. So of course, I'm sure a lot of you have guessed it, we're going to be talking about the sextant modifier that adds in Tormented Spirits to your maps with the chance of you getting a Scarab for every possessed monster. So let's quickly take a quick look at this sextant modifier itself here, and we'll kind of deep dive into it. So here it is. The first 10 possessed monsters drop an additional polished scarab in this case. And then obviously that area contains an additional tormented betrayer. So the other line, the betrayer thing, that's not important. What we actually want is the 10 possessed monsters drop an additional polished scarab. So how do you get a possessed monster, and why is this good? So obviously scarabs are a very sought after currency item in PoE. It's one of the best ways to enhance your mapping experience and get a lot more fun out of the game. So that's why we want those scarabs. But what is a possessed monster and how do we best get that? So a possessed monster is basically any rare or unique monster that has been possessed by a tormented spirit. So a tormented spirit is traditionally this funny ghost thing which runs away from the player and sometimes will inhabit a rare monster, but it's generally pretty tedious to get it to go inside that monster and possess it. And that's why this kind of sextant modifier hasn't been too popular in the past. So that's definitely pretty interesting here. But as of late, the community has discovered a way to properly use this sextant modifier and get the most effectiveness out of it. And that is to use a prophecy in combinations with the Warband's Zana map device mod. So let's start off with this map device mod. What does it do? So the warbands modifier basically adds multiple warbands to the map. Each warband has 3 to 4 members in it. I think it's actually 4 members on average with the option of 5. So that adds up to around 12-ish unique monsters, which is actually quite a lot of unique monsters, and adding those to the map is going to be very good for having ghosts inhabit them, because obviously ghosts can only inhabit rare and unique monsters. But that would still leave us with the problem of having to chase those nasty ghosts into those unique monsters. Maybe you'll one-shot the ghost off the screen. It'll be really terrible and really annoying, and that's why people have kind of shied away from the sextant modifier in the past and rolled over it. But with the use of a specific prophecy, let's see if I still have one here, this one here, possessed foe, we can take all of the annoyance out of that entirely. So basically what this prophecy does when it activates on the map that you're putting into the device is that at the start of the map generation, it will take all unique monsters and inhabit them automatically with a tormented spirit. So in the case of warbands, we have those 4-ish times 3 packs. You'll have 12 monsters inhabited by ghosts, and they will be considered possessed for the purpose of this sextant modifier. So pretty interesting. You can basically guarantee the 10 scarabs every time that prophecy activates while you have warbands present, and the monsters start out possessed and don't need to mess around with those ghosts. So you can basically clear the map as normal and as quickly as you normally would, providing the prophecy activates. So definitely pretty interesting, and there's definitely a big opportunity here for a lot of currency making indeed. So I want to start out this video with a quick kind of explanation of how the kind of basic way to use prophecy is, and then kind of taking it to the next level. So initially, obviously, you're going to encounter this sextant on your white, yellow, and red maps, and that's going to allow you to get rusted, polished, and gilded scarabs respectively based on the color of sextant you're using. So if you're using white sextants, you'll get the rusted. If you're using yellows, you'll get the polished, and if you're using reds, you'll get the gilded. And all that matters is where the sextant modifier is rolled. So I can roll a red map here, for example, with the gilded sextant modifier, and even if I do a white map in the radius, it'll still drop those gilded scarabs, essentially allowing you to influence the atlas even further than you normally would generally by shaping or eldering maps around your kind of primary map here for the purpose of changing the sextant modifiers you can roll. So basically what I mean by this is I shaped up and eldered these two so that I could roll the gilded and polished scarab sextants on my city squares, which is pretty interesting. So you definitely can, for example, if you wanted all of your sextants around city square to be yellows, shape everything around it and then have all yellows on there for the highest chance at this scarab kind of sextant modifier. So basically what I'm saying here is I've done the math, and if you do in fact roll a sextant modifier, on one of your maps, it is definitely worth it to go out and buy a prophecy and grab and cash in those 10 sextant modifiers. So 10 sextant, 10 scarabs there we go, got there in the end, and kind of like rack up that currency. Now, how expensive should you be looking to go on this prophecy, and when should you stop? So I think a pretty good guide of when you should kind of look to buy and not buy this prophecy is the price of sulfite scarabs. So let's quickly look at the rusted sulfite scarab here. So you get 10 scarabs and there's 13 scarabs overall. So on average, you're probably going to get around 1 sulfite scarab per activation of the prophecy. So you can generally use the sulfite scarab as a pretty good guide for how expensive the prophecy should be. So right now, the sulfite scarab is 22C for the worst one. So if you're paying 15C for the actual like prophecy, there's pretty much no way you can lose at all, because obviously you've got 15C plus the 2C-ish to roll the warbands. Let's say you get really unlucky and you only get 1 activation and the whole section set. So you're paying 6 plus 15, 21C. If you get 1 sulfite scarab, it's basically all paid for anyway, and you get the other 9 scarabs for free. So basically, what I'm saying is use the sulfite scarab as a guide to tell you how much you should be paying, and if it starts exceeding how expensive the sulfite scarab is, or whatever the most expensive scarab is in general, it's probably not a very good time to buy it, and you should start ignoring the sextant mod. Obviously, in the case of polished and then gilded, it's definitely pretty much always going to be worth it to use this sextant modifier in its fullest and go out and buy the prophecy, because you're not just looking at the sulfite scarab as being the only good one, you're starting to look at a whole bunch of other ones. Like Legion makes up for it, as well as sulfite, and you can start really racking up a lot of currency. So overall, my advice is, if you get this and you're just doing your normal maps normally, you know, you're just rolling your sextants, you're just doing the maps, use it when it comes up 100%, go by the prophecy, assuming that it all checks out. So very interesting information there, and obviously a lot of money to be made if we can get that naturally spawning. So pretty cool, but let's see if we can take this a step further. So now, obviously we know, go out and get the prophecy, roll warbands, all that good stuff. But what if we wanted to try and mass farm scarabs as efficiently as possible? Well, this is exactly what I try to do, and I do have some results for you guys on whether this strategy is viable. So basically, as I lean forward in my chair here, the premise of this strategy is as follows. Use 1 sextant location and continually roll it until you get the Scarab modifier, and then run 3 maps with the prophecy active, and then after those 3 maps, get out, roll the sextant modifier again, and go in and keep going. So rolling a batch of sextants till you get it, maps, backwards and forwards, farming as many Scarabs per hour as you can, and seeing if that's worth it. So what's it going to come down to here in terms of whether this is effective? So naturally, you wouldn't have to worry about the price of sextants, because it's basically a cost that will pay itself back just by running the maps. But by overriding sextants continually, you now have to write those off as expenses. You're not getting any value from those because they're obviously going into the abyss for all intents and purposes. So we have to worry about a new expense that we wouldn't normally worry about, and that is the cost of each of the sextants that we're burning. So we now need to understand how rare this sextant modifier is, and what the potential payback is. And of course, I have a spreadsheet here, but before we go into the spreadsheet, I want to go over a quick strategy, which is kind of a bit of a relic of the past, which I use to increase my chances of rolling the sextant modifier. So you can see here, I have a bunch of different sextants all bunched up here, and this is what's called sextant blocking. And it used to be very popular in the olden days of PoE, but it then got removed with the sextant modifier cap. And you still can do it, but obviously it's not as good unless you're just trying to roll 1 super sextant, which we're trying to do here. So the general idea is, if you roll a bunch of modifiers here, you can make it so it blocks out certain mods from the sextant pool, and makes it so that you have a higher chance of rolling 1 sextant in like over another. So that's exactly what I've done here, and I've increased my chances significantly at rolling the Scarab modifier through blocking. You can look up and dig up some old videos if you're interested in doing that, but that's how it is there. So yeah, we've got an increased chance at the Scarab modifier now, and we also have some pretty good information about how much we should be spending on the prophecy and the kind of profitability of it. So let's dive into the spreadsheet here, and we'll go over all the way to the left, and I'll take you through kind of my trail of thought and thinking. Obviously this is a bit of a messy spreadsheet, but I kind of want to just get it out there, my testing, and show you guys what I found. So to begin with, I needed to get an average expected return per prophecy activation. And what I wanted to do here is take the price of every Scarab for each type and kind of add them all together and then average them to kind of get an on average how much I can expect per Scarab drop if I took the actual average over hundreds and hundreds of them. So on average, you can expect each Scarab that drops in a rusted sextant modified map to be 3.8 chaos, and overall you'll get 10 of them, so that's 38 chaos on average if you did a ton of these things. So it's definitely pretty interesting, not a bad number there. So 38 chaos raw per activation of the prophecy, not a bad amount. And then obviously for polished, it continues to go up to 82/83. And then obviously with gilded, you start getting a lot of currency at around 176 on average for the 10 scarabs. So pretty interesting. We have our number of how much we can expect to get per activation now, but now we need to understand the expenses and the chance to actually roll these things, and then maybe come up with a few other strategies to help those costs out. So let's move it along over here. So initially I did a lot of testing on standard where kind of currency doesn't matter. You can kind of just go there to get knowledge. I didn't record those results, but when I came over to League, I did start recording my results. So initially I decided to go with the actual rusted scarabs here. We'll just change this to here because on League it's 15 chaos right now for the possessed foe prophecy. So you can see here initially I used 7 sextants to roll my first one, I used 9 to roll my second one, and then I rolled 26 to get my third one. So it's a little bit all over the place, but I would probably assume it's around the 1 in 15 to 20 range for the rusted kind of modifier with all those blocks that I had on there. Obviously I don't have a massive sample size, and you probably might get a little bit lucky and unlucky depending on how it goes, but there it is. Now the initial problem and the main problem with the rusted Scarab modifier is the following. Initially, the profits are very low. You can see here I only make 12C for this activation, 11C for this, and 23 for C for this one. But you can see where I do get 2 activations in a sextant set. I do make quite a little bit more money. Obviously there's more kind of profit to be expected there, but we can't rely on that. And then I did some further testing on standard, and I realized that the actual prophecy activation rate is around 50 to 40%. So that's definitely a decent number, and it's something that you can reliably kind of say, okay, I'm going to get one of these at least per sextant kind of clump, with the possibility of 2. So pretty cool there, and it definitely does support that kind of argument. So yeah, definitely not a whole lot of currency to be made here, just purely from the fact that the actual scarabs themselves don't sell for much. And then what makes this doubly not worth it is the fact that you have to sell all those scarabs as well. One of the saving factors that might be there for the rusted kind of strategy, which is the white sextant kind of spamming strat, is that if you have these in bulk, you can sell them for significantly more to people who don't want to do 1x1 trades, and for people who do like really a lot of maps and just want to get stuff done quick and get back into maps. You could probably charge a 50% premium on some of these trades, but even so, that's still not looking at very much profit. It's probably good for some players, and maybe that will eventually be worth it for you guys who kind of like don't have such high standards in terms of how much you make. But yeah, for me, I wasn't seeing too much results here, so I decided to move on to door number 2, which was the polished scarabs. So at this point, I decided to do a bit of digging on the actual occurrence rate of these sextants, and I actually determined for the white and the yellow sextants, it was about the same as any normal traditional kind of sextant modifier. So I'm talking breach, abyss, added monsters, all that kind of stuff. It's around that kind of occurrence rate for the polished and rusted scarab kind of sextant mods. So they're pretty common, and they're decently acquirable just by spamming out the sextants. So the reason I looked this up is because I wanted to compare the two kind of rates here, because my first 2 tests, obviously I got 18 and then 15, which is definitely on the higher end of those kind of occurrences. And that's not necessarily bad, and you can see here I did actually make quite a bit of profit still on those, but that would be after selling them as well. But yeah, definitely pretty interesting. And the main thing I wanted to point out here with the yellows is that there's quite a few new variables that get introduced as we approach those yellow sextants. So the first thing is that there's new modifiers in the yellow sextant pool, and there's a considerable amount. So the actual effectiveness or efficacy of blocking sextant modifiers out using the strat we talked about earlier becomes less impactful, because let's say you have 20 mods, you take 5 out, that's 25% less mods. But if you have 30 and you take 5 out, that's significantly less mod effective than taking it out of the 20, right? So definitely something to consider there, and you will be getting overall less effectiveness from those blocks, and also you'll be getting less kind of occurrences of your Scarab modifier because there's just more things in there that could be popping up. So yeah, you can expect this number to be a little bit worse than the rusted one, but not significantly worse to the point where it would be like from like a on average per 15 to like 50. It's not going to be like that, and you don't have to worry about that too much. So you can still expect to get one every like 20-25 sextants that you put in, and that will still leave you with pretty much no room to not make a profit as long as you do enough of them and the RNG averages out. So definitely, you can make quite a lot of money doing this, in my opinion, because you can see here, just from one activation with around 18 to 15 used, we're already making more than we did in like 2 activations of the rusted ones. And assuming we charge that 50% premium, you're actually starting to make like 50C per activation of the prophecy, which is actually starting to look very, very good in terms of a currency making strategy. And we're actually going to go on to talk about this more, because there's actually even things that make yellow sextants even better than white sextants, even apart from the actual fact that you make a lot more currency from the scarabs. So what makes yellow sextants so incredibly good, and this strategy actually viable for a player looking to chase a lot of currency? Now there's a few things here, but obviously we'll move sextants about the scarabs aside for 1 minute here, and we're going to talk about Harbinger, and we're going to talk about Legion. So Legion, we obviously know all about Legion. Probably everyone watching this video played Legion League and knows that it's very, very good for currency, and Marrakech splinters are currently ridiculously priced, almost at 5C each, and all the other splinters are also reasonably priced, and you can expect to make quite a lot of currency from that, depending on the tier of map that you're farming. So Legion in white maps is significantly worse than yellows, and then yellows are significantly worse than reds. So if you're doing this strategy on red maps, you can expect that Legion will be a massive, massive moneymaker for you when it comes up while you're doing this strategy. So you should 100% run it on red maps. I think you should definitely run it on yellows, but on white maps, I'd almost roll over it just because it's so bad on white maps. But we're going to talk about it on red and yellows. So on red and yellows, basically what this sextant modifier is going to do is, let's say you roll it, it will actually subsidize and kind of cover the costs of this strategy and allow you to make quite a lot more profit than you normally would be able to just exclusively doing rusted scarabs on white maps. So Legion, you're going to be getting a lot of Legion, and when it comes up, that's just more money in the bank for you. It doesn't hurt your chances of getting the Scarab modifier at all, and running it is just going to be advantageous. So very, very good there. You're going to be getting Legion now by running yellows where you wouldn't in whites. So that's very, very good. Next up, you also have Harbinger. So I did want to talk about this really quickly. Harbinger is basically a sextant modifier that starts appearing in yellows, and what it does is basically turbocharge all Harbingers that are in the map, as well as turn the bosses into Harbingers themselves. So that's a very, very interesting modifier, and it's going to take a few seconds to explain. So normally, Harbingers drop a pool of currency kind of fragments. It can be ancient, exalted, annulment, all these kinds of things. And then generally drop like a few of them. But basically what the sextant modifier does is it makes them drop about 3 or 4 times the amount as they normally would, maybe even more than that. So basically 5 times the amount of Harbinger fragments from your like Harbingers or more. Maybe a bit less, but I don't know. I don't know the exact amount. I didn't count the stacks. So definitely pretty good. So basically you're getting like at least, let's say 3 times the benefit for every Harbinger in that map. So if you roll Zana, which would add 2 Harbingers, you're going to be effectively getting 6 Harbingers worth of loot. So that's pretty insane, and it's a very, very good sextant modifier. So if we scroll down here to where I have a bit of information about that, you will actually see that over 9 maps, I got on average about 12 ancient shards per map, and about almost like 7.5 annulments per map. I got half an exalt shard, and I got 3 harbinger shards per map. So that's all per map. And that was using the sextant modifier, obviously, Zana, and a rusted harbinger scarab. So that's not too much investment, and obviously ancient orbs right now are around 50 chaos, so that's 25C just per map, and then half of an annulment orb is like 10-ish C for those like 7.4. So you're looking at around maybe around like the 40C-ish mark here just per map from rolling this. Again, similar to Legion, this is going to subsidize your income and mitigate some of those costs from running the strategy significantly. So that's very, very good, and it can actually be done on white maps. Now, one little caveat to this is that I was doing the Harbinger strategy on a map with 3 bosses, and what that basically does is add that kind of bonus to the boss 3 times, because it's added to each of the bosses. So that's basically an additional 3 Harbingers, and then what I was actually doing to the step further is I was picking out all the maps which said the bosses are twinned. I can show you guys what that looks like here. In my city squares, I was picking out maps like this. Area contains 2 unique bosses, so it takes that 3 boss map to a 6 boss map. So I was essentially getting 6 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2. So that's 11 Harbingers, and then if you say that it's triple kind of fragment kind of thing, it's like 33 Harbingers worth of loot. So definitely pretty insane there. And you can kind of see why this is such an effective sextant modifier. And then you do that 3 times, which is kind of like almost, it's like 100 Harbingers worth of loot effectively, assuming it was triple the amount of currency there. So pretty interesting in my opinion. And this is definitely going to be a very, very good money maker for you, as well as the Scarabs in addition to Legion. So pretty cool. And this kind of the sextant rolling strategy is starting to come together, isn't it? It's quite interesting indeed. And with all that said, I believe if you're willing to run enough of these, and you can get bulk Ancient Orbs, you can get bulk Scarabs, and you can get a few emblems together, you're going to be making a lot of currency, a significant amount of currency for your average player, enough so that it will justify the trading time and buying the prophecies and stuff like that. Now, what's actually cool about this is that you don't have to buy Harbinger Scarabs, because you drop them anyway, and you can just use your own. That was pretty cool. I did enjoy that part. It's like self-sustaining the Scarabs. So in terms of how rare Legion and the Harbinger mods are. So the Harbinger mod is about as rare as the polished Scarab mod. You can see here that I did start to record a little bit. I got 1 Harby in 26 here, 1 Scarab in 18 here, Harby in 6, Scarab in 15, and you can kind of see it ping-ponging backwards and forwards there. And each one of those will basically cover the cost completely of the sextants that came before it, which is quite nice, and you don't really have to worry too much about that sextant cost, at least on yellows at the current price of yellows, which is about 1.7C. So very, very interesting indeed. Okay, so let's move on to the reds. Now that we've established that the strategy works for both white and yellow sextants, does it work for reds? Now, I'm immediately going to come out of the gates and say, no, it doesn't. Obviously, the payoff is potentially huge. We can see here 176C on average for 10 gilded scarabs. So you have a lot of wiggle room to play with here, and a lot of potential to get this. You can obviously roll quite a lot of sextants and then hopefully get it, and then you'll still be making money. But let's go into the actual results here. So as I said, I did quite a lot of it on standard, and I came up with a number around 1 in 100. That's how often I was getting the sextant modifier. Obviously with sextant blocking, it will be a little bit better. But the thing with red sextants is that there's significantly more, like a ton more sextant modifiers thrown into the pool in the red sextant modifier pool. It's quite ridiculous. An additional like 10 come in or something like that. Some of them are quite rare, some of them aren't though. So it definitely does make things a little bit trickier. So we have a lot more there. In addition to that, obviously the actual occurrence rate of the Scarab modifier itself is actually, seemingly by my results, is a lot rarer. And if you go over to POEDB, it says it goes from like a 2.5% occurrence rate to like a 1% occurrence rate. So they've made sure this thing is rare. And you can see here, I rolled my first one in 18 red sextants, and I was like, oh boy. And I made about 100C profit there, which is pretty nice. Not bad for a day's work. And that was off 1 activation. And then I decided to go again. I decided to go again for another one. And then I was 102 red sextants deep. Oh boy, not good at all. And the actual icing on the cake here is I didn't even get it after rolling 102 red sextants. At that point, I was like, no dude, this is not going to be worth it. It can't be worth it. And I think in general that sentiment is true. It will not be worth it. To hard roll for gilded scarabs will not be worth it. Pretty much ever, I would say. Unless they bring sextant blocking back into the game and you can get like 16 blocks again. Whew, that would be good. But no, it won't be worth it with the current state of the game. So basically, without dwelling on red sextants anymore, I can basically rule that out. However, if you do get this on your red sextant maps that you just happen to be rolling, oh man, you should definitely be jogging out there and getting that prophecy ASAP, because you're about to cash in probably about 100C of profit after those scarabs sell. So pretty awesome in my opinion, and there it is. So overall, let's sum it all up. Should you be using the prophecy on your maps? White maps, it's kind of optional. You could roll over it, you could do it. Do you like scarabs? If you have to sell them yourselves, you probably shouldn't go out and get it. But if you like to use scarabs yourself, you're a bit of a delver, maybe you like to use them in general, definitely worth it. Go ahead and get that that prophecy, and you're going to be getting some scarabs to cash in and have a bit of fun with. Yellow maps, pretty much always. If you're rolling these nationally on yellow maps, 100% go out and get that prophecy. You're going to be making at least like 50C at the end of the day, because obviously your warband's 6C, and then your prophecy is probably like, what, 15C. So you're going to be making a big chunk of change from rolling this and getting the prophecy active. Definitely go out and get it. It's going to be a big cash influx for you, and it's going to cover the cost increase from from white to yellow sextants, and it's going to really help you sustain that kind of currency and sextant kind of sustain. Pretty good. And if you get it naturally on reds, as we just mentioned, immediately drop everything, go buy a prophecy, get it done. It's going to be big currency, almost an exalt of profit. Well, not in today's economy. It's like half an exalt in today's economy. It feels bad, but yeah, pretty interesting. So yeah, overall, that's how I feel about it. Naturally, now, if you want to do this as a hard rolling strategy with sextant blocking, in my opinion, rusted, not worth your time, at least for me. Yellow, it is definitely worth your time if you're willing to do that Harbinger sextant modifier as well, and also maybe take advantage of Legion in the higher tier maps. And then obviously on red maps, as we just discussed, it's probably never going to be worth it, so don't waste your time. So there it is. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. It's definitely been a bit of a different one, but this was my exploration of this sextant modifier. I decided to deep dive into it, and I feel like it's been pretty fun. And you can expect a lot more content based around kind of investigating the little bits of PoE, which I haven't personally touched on before, and making that into videos. So there it is. I'll see you guys in the next one, or over on Twitch, which I will be on there now because I finished university. And that is all. See ya.